Dude, when I was at C2E2, I like dropped one of these lenses. I don't know if you can see, but it was like totally shattered and I had to repair it again. And at this point, this shell and these lenses are literally just being held together with a hope and a prayer. But I'll take it because that's what makes it individual. And I'm also too broke to get another shell. That's really convenient given the fact that this video is literally me building another shell. Anyway. Hey, what up? I'm Miles and welcome back. And yes, as I said in the intro, we are building another face shell today. Now, last weekend was C2E2 and I went out and I met a bunch. I can't speak at all today. Now, last weekend was C2E2 and like always, I had a blast. I got to meet a bunch of you guys got to meet me. We did a bunch of fun stuff. I trooped on Saturday. I accidentally got to meet Andy Serkis and that was pretty cool. And of course, I gave away these 3 custom Spider-Man medallions to 3 lucky winners. And those people are redeeming them to get their free Spider-Man suit. And I think that's something I'm going to be doing for future conventions from now on. Whenever I go to a convention, I'm going to make these Spider medallions and give them out to give more free suits to more convention goers. Because it's always fun. But that is not at all what this video is about. Now, on this channel, we've built a lot of face shells, and they all come from my boy on Instagram, Matthew DC. I asked him to send me the kits, and we build them here together on YouTube. Now, if you remember, a couple months back, I had a box full of 3 separate face shells because my boy was running a sale, so I got 3 of them. And I was slowly unboxing and building them over the months. We had the PS5 Miles Morales shell, the Into the Spider-Verse Miles Morales shell, which gave us a lot of trouble for some reason. And there was one more mystery shell in that box that I've been teasing. If you were keeping up with my Instagram, you should know what that shell is. But if you click on this video, you know what it is because the title and thumbnail already said it. In this video, we are building the Amazing Spider-Man 2 face shell. Now, this is one that I have wanted to put together for a very long time. As many people are aware, I cosplay Spider-Man, and one of the suits that I do the most is the Amazing Spider-Man 2, and I do have an Amazing Spider-Man 2 face shell. However, it's not the greatest. The lenses aren't super great. I can't really see out of them that well. The insides of them were built fairly poorly with just magnets glued on to the actual inside lens, and there wasn't any like depth to the lens where you could like hide a magnet and make it flush. That's not to say that this shell doesn't look great because it did its job for however long we've used it, and we've used this shell for a pretty long time. But as all good things have to come to an end, it is time for an upgrade. So we are kissing this shell goodbye, and in its honor, we are building a brand new Amazing Spider-Man 2 shell today. So without further ado, let's actually build it. Okay, so this video isn't really an unboxing because I kind of already have all the pieces out and displayed, but even though it's not an unboxing, I'm still going to go through every piece and show you. So first and foremost, we do have the actual face shell itself, of course printed by my boy Matthew DC on Instagram, the raw shell. And as always, I'm going to praise Matthew's work. Like, this comes right off the printer, but you can tell just the amount of detail and just the quality that comes from a shell like this. I don't really have to do any major body work to this. All I really do when I get a shell from him in a kit form is I just clean up any of these 3D print boogers like that. But it's not really a lot of work. It's just a once over with sandpaper and maybe just a blade to get some of the things off, and that's it. Of course, we'll hit this with some plasti dip at the end so that the mask actually sticks to it, but that's something that we can do at the very, very end. Of course, the second piece is the outer lenses themselves, which again, I believe are resin printed, and the quality is just immaculate coming right off the printer. As per usual with these lenses, there's not a lot of work to do. Just sanding those little dots off that they came right off of the resin printer. In terms of the color, they're already the color that I need. However, I might hit them with just another coat of gloss black just to make sure the sheen is all consistent. And if I do any body work to it, just clean it up. If I scratch it or do any marks to it, I'm going to want one clean coat over it. So one clean coat of gloss black will probably do what I need it to on that. The inner mesh, as always, there's not a lot for us to do. We're just going to do a light dusting of white airbrush paint as per usual on these. Now, I was thinking about doing some light shading around this ridge line here, right here on the base, right before it actually reaches over this arc. However, looking at the lens now, you can kind of see how there's this natural shading to it when it overlaps. I'm not sure exactly if I want to do the shading on that yet, but it's something I will have to decide before I fully assemble because that's where these pieces come in. These pieces are really cool and something that I'm super excited about. These are the plastic domes that Matthew includes in his kits that make the lenses reflective. One of the main traits about the Amazing Spider-Man 2 mask is the fact that it has these reflective lenses. It has like these mirrored bubbles on the lens to give this bug eye effect. So instead of it just looking like normal mesh behind an actual eye lens, it's something more akin to this, where it's the mesh behind the bubble that sits inside the islands like this to give you that reflective effect. Now, of course, these did also come raw off of wherever he used them. I'm assuming these are vacuum form plastic over a mold. I did start to trim them a little bit here just to kind of play with it and see what I was doing, to see what could slice it, because I am going to have to trim off a decent amount to make them actually work. In terms of basic assembly, there's not a lot for us to do. We're going to do some minor body work on this, minor body work on that, paint these white, paint that black, and then when it comes to attaching everything using our like 2-part epoxy, that's what we have to be a little bit more careful using our magnets, of course, like matching those up, but also finding a way to safely attach this without getting any glue or smudginess on it. I'm pretty sure it's just going to be a case of lining it up till it best fits and making sure I still have some overhang so that it sits inside this little recess and I can actually pull the glue and like stick it in there. But again, it's going to be a bit of like very carefully measuring, clipping off, and just doing it very slow, because obviously I can chop off more, but I can't chop off less. But with all that out of the way, you guys have seen me build a shell before. You don't need to see me narrate every step. Let's get into it. But now this step I will explain a little bit. When I applied my first layer of the black airbrush paint on the lenses, it came off a little spotty, so I went back over with a super high grit sandpaper and I wet sanded it down just to get a smoother finish. Then when I reapplied the black airbrush paint, I just went over very lightly to get a whole cohesive finish over the whole lens. Now what I'm using here for the magnets, we've used before. It's just the 2-part epoxy. It's a 1-to-1 mix ratio. You just mix it up and apply it just like glue. Nothing super fancy, nothing that we haven't done before. However, when it came to the lenses on the inside, I just used basic Loctite. Nothing super complicated here. Okay, so I know all of the other steps, like the sanding, the priming, the painting, the magnets, all that stuff. We've done that in every other shell video, so you guys kind of know how that stuff works. It's not a lot to explain. You guys kind of get it. You're pros at this point. But for this shell, there was one extra step that I wanted to make sure I like went over and showed you guys how I figured out. And that is, of course, the plastic dome to add on to the shell itself, to give it this reflective kind of bug eye effect. Now obviously this is the finished one. This is the one that I was kind of toying around with, and I tried a couple different things before I found a method that I actually worked. And when I say I tried a couple different things, what I mean is I tried a couple things in my head, because I really only had one piece to do it. So obviously these are the 3 pieces that I am given to kind of build the eye, right? And this is obviously way too big to fit in there, so we had to trim it. So I kind of bounced around a few different ideas, but the one that I settled on was essentially replicating the shape of this mesh by basically just putting it in there and trimming everything around it by like making a line here and trimming everything around that mesh, so that I had a perfect 1-to-1 size of this mesh, because essentially they both only have like this 1/4 inch up into about 1/8 of an inch, this little recess inside the lens to attach to. So if you look on the inside of the one that I completed, you can't really see the layer of glass because they kind of overlap perfectly. They're the same exact shape, but the glass is in there first, and then I just replicate the shape and put the mesh on top. Super simple stuff, but if you have this shell and you're confused about how to do it, just follow along when I do this next one. And also, when I was gluing it, I made sure to place all of the things together and then pop my lenses in, just to absolutely make sure there was no bubble effect and there was nothing that was going wrong. But that's half of our shell already, and basically all we have to do is glue this on and we're done. We're getting pretty good at doing these shells. Okay, no, a lot of people leave this stuff out when they make mistakes, but I find it very important to do so, because it's kind of my whole niche, is messing things up. Right as I said that I'm getting good at these mask builds, I glue my magnets in backwards, so that doesn't work yet. Oops. Now, as I mentioned before, the way that I was doing these dome shapes was applying the mesh on the inside, finding the shape, and then matching it perfectly. However, I was very careful to take my time. I kept going over again and again, putting the mesh back in, tracing it, and then cutting it, because like I said, I really only had one piece and one shot to cut it. So I would rather cut off too little and then keep going in and trimming it,
versus not having enough. And then the same thing here when I put it in the lens, I had to make sure that I had just enough room for that recess so that the glue slotted in, and I needed to make those notch marks so that it went around the magnets just like the mesh did. After the domes fit, I had to do the same thing with the mesh to kind of increase those holes so that the magnets could kind of fit everything with it together. But I made sure to do the magnets one at a time because every time I put the mesh in, if I trimmed too far, I would have an excess on one side. So I did the magnets one at a time, making sure I had just enough room for all of them. And there we have it for the Amazing Spider-Man 2 shell build. Now, I will come off and say right off the bat, this is an unfinished product, simply for the fact that I do not properly have a mask to show you what the finished product would be. I did test 2 different mask prints that I had on that shell, one that I used on my old Amazing Spider-Man 2 shell, and the one that I'm wearing right now on my all the time shell. And I did kind of lay both of those over to see what would work best. Neither of them really worked because the first one I used with my other mask is not a proper mask. The fact that I've been able to stretch it this far along with my Amazing Spider-Man 2 suit is astounding. And this one is just so fit formed to this mask and this shell because of how often I use it, that it really doesn't look proper in any other mask. So even though we did complete the shell and I showed you how to build a shell kit in its entirety, we can kind of consider this a part 1 for the mask upgrade itself because I am planning on ordering not only a new mask, but a new Amazing Spider-Man 2 suit in general from Print Costume. When is that going to happen? I don't really know. Hopefully soon though, because that's too good of a shell to just leave as a part 1. So I'm not going to promise anything yet, but just know that it is coming. Also, if you are looking to get your own Spider-Man suit, make sure to check out printcostume.com. That's where I get all of my Spider-Man suits, and if you use code MILES15, you can save 15% off on your order, and the credits that we earn from that code usage, I use to give suits back out to you guys. Speaking of which, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe because at 75K, we are doing another massive giveaway, giving out more Spider-Man suits to the community. As well as 30K on Instagram, we're also giving away more Spider-Man suits. So if you enjoyed this video, this kind of content, or just me in general, that kind of sounded weird, make sure to subscribe and follow on both here and Instagram for another chance to win Spider-Man suits later down the line. Anyway, that's all I have for this video. So thank you so much for watching. As always, peace and love, do good things, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Yeah, Spider-Man!